Hello and welcome back to the Overlander Overview Show, the first show of 2022. We're back. Thank you for joining us. Overlander, thank you for sticking with us. The best two-horse box that is out there. I say that with my biased opinion. I've been using it for everything over the Christmas period. Folks, I bought two folds and put them in it. Easy to slide those partitions across, make a nice bit of space. Sparks has been taking her horse out for outings, just needed to go and jump a few jumps over Christmas, so she's been doing that. So the Overlander I've been to a point, folks, my new little winter activity. I went point to point and got towed in by a tractor through muddy fields, and that was with the Overlander as well. So look, we've been using it for everything. It's an absolutely great tool to have in the yard. So thank you, Overlander, for supporting the show. Thank you, listeners.
For a second. You're towed in. Probably not.
Well, look,
Overlander's great.
I wasn't going to say
Overlander's great. Overlander's great. We got towed into a field in our Overlander.
So this was Sunday, the 2nd of January, folks. There'd been a lot of rain in Ireland, and there was not a vehicle in Cork. It was actually Ballindennis, so familiar territory for us. Every vehicle was towed in. At one point, we saw a lorry, and we thought that the tractor was going to have to get towed by another tractor, and it was going to be some double towing action. That's happened to me before, actually, with my big truck. Some double towing action happened to me at Kililkey, Danny Delury. So there we go.
Stop saying that.
Anyway, this is a big topic, and I guess it comes a little bit of heated discussion on social media, and I'm joined by Nicole Brown, who flagged this conversation that was going on. We had put the top ELOs, which is a metric that we're used to talking about for the highest rated horses in the world. We put those out on social media just before Christmas. And Nicole, there was good chat, good debate, good emotion about who's the best horse in the world. So we figured a way to discuss this in a little bit more detail. You looking forward to it?
Yeah, I am. And I think it's going to be really interesting for us to get our immediate reactions to it as well, because everybody has an opinion, and there are lots of different ways that we can track performance, and we've talked about horses for courses and that kind of thing, and it is very rare that you would see a field whereby all of the superstars, the best horses in the world, would go up against one another head to head. Put my teeth back in, listeners, all over the place. But this is a way of doing it, and I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. I think we're going to have some healthy debate. And one thing I would say is I'm sure that anybody listening along, watching along, will have their opinions too, and I'll be very interested to hear them as well.
You say that now.
I know, I say that now. I'll be like, no, don't tell us.
Mute comments.
No. Should you explain, Sam, that actually people are listening into us, but actually we can see each other, and hopefully people will be able to see us too.
Yeah, I'm in two minds about that. I mean, I've just jumped off a horse, so I don't know if I want people to see me. I've suppressed the bouffant hair, which it's getting quite voluminous and frizzy. I think it's time I use some shampoo and conditioner again, just to get it silky again. So I've done the SAP cap for the Overlander show. Controversial, but I don't have an Overlander cap. So there we go. So that's how I'm sorting out my branding. We've used the SAP Prediction Center, or the Echo Ratings Predictor, powered by SAP, however we want to brand that. But we've got the Prediction Center on the show. How we did? You want me to talk about how we're streaming this show? But I think that's it. We're on YouTube. There'll be some clips. I'm not sure if the full show will be on. What I want to get into, Nicole, is how we actually went about this whole process and how we designed this show. We needed to get the samples to have this discussion about who would be the best horse in the world. The concept here is that if all of the top horses in the world lined up against each other at a venue, who would win, or what would the chances of success be? The venue we chose was Badminton. You could choose Aachen for the pinnacle of short format. You could choose a Kentucky or a Burley for slightly different 5 stars. You could choose the championship. You could choose a Pertoni. But Badminton is the one that happens year in, year out, and that's the one we went with. And then how did we get our field together, and what size of field did we take? So we took 35 horses, and there was a bit of a process to get those 35 horses. And I think you're entitled to have an opinion as to saying, why isn't so-and-so in the 35? So I guess as a starting point, I'll take you through how we got those 35 horses. Sound good?
Sounds great. Yeah, so these are your Sam Watson's top 35 horses in the world right now.
It's all objective. It's all objective. And the first one is actually the most simple. I just ended up, and this was the last step we took, but we just fired in the top 10 from the Olympics. So anyone who made the top 10 in the Olympics got in straight off the bat. The unlucky losers, so to speak, from that process were horses like Grovine de Rev, who was 11th, and actually doesn't make it in on any of our other criteria, which was a close one, and is definitely one of the ones that we've debated. But I think, Janelle herself would probably accept that, yes, Grovine could easily be considered to be in the top 35 horses in the world. That's fair enough. But what we're trying to do is say who would win if we put all of them together on the day, who would win? And I think Grovine, between probably the dressage and possibly the speed, I think is always going to bump into one or two. So that was one of the unlucky omissions there. Then we used the EquiRatings HPR, so the high performance rating. So we looked at who put up massive performances in 2021. And that's the other criteria, actually. All of these horses needed to have competed in 2021. So SAP Asha P isn't there. Does that upset you, D?
It doesn't upset me. It just makes me question your criteria. But no,
you
I
won't
agree.
Be upset when she goes to win like the World Championships or something.
You've got to draw certain lines. Inevitably one or two fall on the wrong side of that, but I still think your reasoning is sound. We're looking at right now, so you've got to have registered an international result last year to be considered in the right now part of the sentence. So no, I think that's fair.
Okay, so then using this HPR rating, we looked at horses that had produced a rating of over 100 at each of the three kind of high performance levels. So your 5-star, your 4-star long, and your 4-star short. So at 5-star, I'll run through them in order very quickly. We've got Falco in there. He produced the highest HPR, and he's actually got one of the low. I think he's got the second lowest ELO in the top 35. So the biggest performance of the year, but actually one of the lowest rated horses. And I think that's what was really interesting about the discussion that we had on social media. There's recency bias because Poe was the most recent 5-star that we've had. It was a massive performance. He smashed them up, and the ratings reflect that. There's an objective metric out there that reflects that he put in a huge performance. There's another objective metric built on all the same concepts that says when you look at this horse over time, he is still the least consistently top class horse of these top 35. So that's really what's going to be interesting about 2022 is watching Falco in which direction. I assume he keeps going on his upward trajectory, but the ELO says just hang on a second. He's still got to prove it time and again. Falco,
I would just bring that's Falco and Tim Price. I would just bring that back to common sense though for a minute, in terms of we're using HPR and we're using ELO as two metrics that we're talking about when we're describing that. HPR is a single one-off performance. So what that's telling us is that Poe was a brilliant individual performance. Anyone like you've performed well in 3 phases, you've beaten a lot of people, and that it wasn't necessarily easy conditions. So in terms of how other horses did, we can say that it's a big performance. ELO is telling us something different. Sam mentioned consistency, but if we just think about it in English, go and look at Falco's record before you say like that any of this stuff is mad. He beat a really strong field at Poe, but his cross-country jumping record across the last couple of years is middling. It's either very good or it's very bad. Now it's been very good and improving, and it was a very, very good day at Poe. So that's what gets you an individual performance metric. It doesn't equate to an ELO, which is more of a kind of a quality and quantity. Can you consistently beat good horses? Because sometimes Falco has been finishing in the bottom half of a field because of cross-country jumping penalties. That's part of what happened, but that's part of the debate around how do you create the top 35 or the top 5 or the top horse in the world. How do you rank these things? You already deal with 5-star versus 4-star in terms of 2 very different competitions. You already deal with the Olympics as almost like another competition in terms of its style. So, is the Olympic champion the best horse in the world? Is the Aachen winner the best horse in the world? Is the badminton winner the best horse in the world? You already deal with all those things, but I think what you've got to deal with on top of that is who does it kind of competition in and competition out, and that's ELO. So you're going to hear Sam talking about ELOs. That's consistency. You're going to hear him talking about HPRs. That's one-off performances. When we tried to come up with this field, Sam, including the kind of you've got to put the top 10 at Tokyo in there for kind of to add another piece of the kind of the common sense that you don't want to lose any of those horses. You're adding all of these factors together to try to come up with what feels right as an intuitive list. But there are different ways of looking at the sport: performance, then consistency, and then big individual competitions like the Olympics.
And you've also got to take into account, because I think the next three on our 5-star rating get really, really interesting. And when we've had this conversation on a previous overview show, but the different types of competitions. Amand de Meneville is the next horse in because of the Olympic Games. It had the quality and the performance. We won't go into each of these in particular, but that's Julia Krajewski's Olympic winner. And then this is the surprise one, and it's the one I still struggle to get my head around a little bit. And I know the rider will tell me that it's obvious. But number 3 in terms of the biggest 5-star performance of the year was Chilly Knight at Bicton, one of the smallest and weakest fields, but it still had plenty of good horses in there. Veneer Kamira, your reigning badminton champion, Ring with Skyboy. Oliver had a couple in there. Pippa's Billy Walk-On put in a huge performance. And Chilly Knight beat them convincingly, finished on his dressage score 28. And what the HPR is rewarding there is a gnarly course, a difficult cross-country jumping course with difficult time. Chilly Knight, Gemma Tattersall, they're in there. On Cue, Boyd Martin, they're in there. Cooley Master Class, Oliver Townend, Billy Walk-On, Pippa Funnel. Ballamore Class gets in there twice for his Lexington, Kentucky win, and again at the European, so he's there. Xavier Fair also gets in there twice for being really consistent on US soil, both Kentucky and Maryland as well. Charlie Van ter Huyten gets in there, a horse that we haven't been talking about too much, but for the Lamoulen win. Toledo de Cursor from the Olympics, Vasily de Lassos from the Olympics, and London 52 from the Olympics as well. And we've already had all of those top horses in there with Vinci de Levine and the French horses as well. They've been in there. 4-star long. There's only 35 horses, folks. Don't worry, we'll get there quickly. JL Dublin.
I'm sorry to jump in, Sam. When you say they're in there twice, they actually just put up 2 performances that would enable them to qualify for our top 35. They're not actually listed twice.
Good point. Exactly. They've met the qualification criteria twice. Yeah. So there we go. Yeah, that's them. In the 4-star longs, it's actually a smaller list, and is very much a Vanche European Championship focused. JL Dublin, Nicola Wilson. Interestingly, and I know we've made this point again, but Amand de Meneville's Samur win is the second highest. It's rated ahead of Brookfield Innocence Avantre. I find that fascinating, for how impressive that European clean sweep from the Brits felt, and how impressive it looked on paper. What you've got to remember is that just buried in the sand, literally, Samur, the sandiest venue in the world, in the spring, no one was really watching that because there was a handful of French and Julia, but that Amand de Meneville performance there, that was the writing, that was the clue, that there was something special in that horse. She's in there second, so again for the second time, but a big 4-star long rating. Brookfield Innocent, Corraway for Sarah Bullimore, Fisher Wildway for Michael Young, Viamont de Mats for Sandra O'Fife. That came at Bertoni as well. In 2021. That's an interesting one. That came in November 2021. So right at the end of the season, Viamont de Mats has been back out again, 27.5 dressage, and finished on it to win Bertoni. And I think that's one that we maybe didn't give much coverage. I hadn't noticed that before, but it puts Viamont de Mats into the frame. Sophie Loeb and J'adore Moi are Buccolo winners, and Yasmin Egum and Anzai de Loire for the Blenheim winners as well. So they're all in there. Sounding good. I'll complete the field. I guess this is actually going to be a hard one to do in terms of the 4-star shorts. RF Scandalous for the US is in there. I think an interesting one as well, as they've had their chances at a big long win. We thought it could have come at Kentucky last year, but you can't discount a horse like that. And has hit the criteria with a massive 4-star short last year. Vendredi Beats and Kitty King, they're in there. A really exciting horse for this year, I think, Lordship's Graffalo and Roz Cantor. They're in there from their Aston the Wolves performance, monkeying around. And Izzy Taylor, they're in there for actually a big Bergam performance. Another thing that I love to see happening here is that you're getting results coming in from, there's actually one here from Arville for Hale Bob, but they're coming in from Bicton's, from Bergham's, from Aston the Wolves, from Tallahassee in the US. They're coming in from around the world. Chipmunk had the highest rated 4-star short performance last year from Le Moulin, from that German championship. There was one Brookfield Quality also comes in. I think we've pretty much rounded out the field here. That's it. I think Brookfield Quality is our last one. We'll go through their chances, and where they feature it, in that lineup in a second. But it's a pretty big list. We also gave a buy to any horse that competed last year that still has an ELO of 750 or higher, and that bought in Philip Dutton Z. It bought in Classic Moe for Janelle Price, and it bought in Virgil for Shane Rose and Veneer Chimera for Piggy French as well. So I think they all warrant their place, and they're all rated higher than 750.
So very, very quick summary. So the listeners are primed and ready for the debate. We have got 35 horses that have been drawn from the top 10 in Tokyo, highest rated ELO horses in the world right now, and those with the highest HBR ratings into the field. So that is our imaginary field, and we are going to put them into the SAP predictive analytics technology that is the prediction center, and let them fight it out to see what would happen if they all went up against each other, and then talk about the potential results and what surprises from it. Is that a fair summary?
It's a very good summary, Nicole. And
I mean, we've been going for nearly 20 minutes. We could have done it in 20 seconds. No, there wouldn't have been no fun in that. There'd have been no fun.
Well, it's hard to. It's so that there's a big achievement in making that list of 35 people. I think one of the emotional pieces around this is if you own any one of those horses, you do feel like you've got one of the best horses in the world, and in your mind, you're saying you're automatically kind of going into top 10, top 5 territory. Because all of these horses have either won something or basically been on a podium or the top 10 at the Olympics. So, if your horse finished in the top 10 at the Olympics last year, you automatically go, I have one of the best 10 horses in the world. That's where your mind is going. But you forget about the others that competed in other places. And I think it's a really interesting conversation to have. I think it's really, really difficult, if not impossible, to do this without some sort of data-driven objective measurement to at least help you to find an order, give you an initial order. And this is what we're always saying from a high performance point of view. Be objective to give yourself a decent picture, and then use your intuition to go, I don't think that horse is going to suit that venue. I feel that this horse, from what I'm seeing in training, is just going the wrong way. And I feel that this other horse is really going the right way. So you could say, look, I really feel Falco's really going the right direction. I think that jump at Poe, you could see a jump again in performance. You're allowed to take that view. That's your intuition. And horses for courses. We've set this around badminton. I have an opinion. I don't think we'll see Amandine Baville there, your Olympic champion. And I think if we did, I think that the likes of a Toledo de Curse would turn the form around with her. Prediction Center doesn't say that. So that, even we will disagree slightly with the analytics, and that's absolutely fine. So we pull it up. Diarm, you're in charge of the screen. Podcast listeners, we will talk you through it if you're listening to this. And help as best we can for you to follow it.
is this prediction center isn't going to be made public, is it, as such? Like it was.
I'm all for it.
Or is it a public? Are people going to be able to log in and see this?
It could end up being confusing because we'll probably put the actual badminton field up quite soon.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can, if people want it, we can just send them the link. But
if you that's a really good. I like the way you've laid that down, Dee. If you want to see it, we'll send you the link.
Yeah, sam@decoratings.com.
Okay.
Yeah, let's put it up on screen. So this is if the top 35 horses on our ratings. This is if they all went to badminton this year, or as of today. How do we think they would? What do we think the betting would look like? Essentially, how do we think they would line up in the betting? It's ready, Nicole.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
Go on then.
So first reaction is, or the first observation, Michael Young and Fisher Chipmunk FRH are top there. Win chance of 17%. Now, I had this conversation with Nicole a second ago. A lot of people are going to interpret that because Fisher Chipmunk is favorite. Again, in our heads, we've gone, equi ratings say that if they all lined up, Michael Young would win. Actually, what equi ratings says is that if they all lined up, Michael Young would lose 83% of the time. You know, that's a clear differentiation to make. We have them winning this less than 2 out of 10 times. So yes, he's favorite. Yes, he's the most likely, but absolutely most of the time there's someone else getting ahead of him. That's the only way, in my opinion, to analyze performance and to predict performance. But I know we always love it. We do it on the podcast all the time, going, who wins? You know, name your winner. Who wins it? And we try and get binary and we try and get black and white. It's hard to escape that, which is fine.
I have to admit, to when this first came up and I saw Fisher Chipmunk, Michael Young, 17% win chance, ahead of Oliver Townend and Ballamore Class, 11% win chance, I did immediately go, how does a horse that has only been to Tokyo, so has no other 5-star on his record, go up against a horse that has something like, 6 top 5s at 5-star, including good couple of victories in there as well, and come out on top? That was my immediate reaction to it. And then Sam and I were talking about it, and Sam put it in exactly the same way that he's just put there, of actually that's saying that Mickey and Chipmunk will lose 83% of the time. Oliver and Ballamore Class would lose, in theory, 89% of the time. It is fascinating when you look at it from that perspective of going, instead of he's favourite to win ahead of that person.
I think we can give these two a bit of airtime because of their CBs and what they've achieved, and the fact that we're talking about number 1 and number 2 in this conversation. And ultimately, this is what this show is all about. Who is currently the best horse in the world? If they were all to line up around a 5-star, and badminton's the longest running 5-star, so that's the one we've gone with. And I think you raise a good point, Nicole. And the way I would try and digest it is if we take it phase by phase, I think Chipmunk is ahead of Ballamore Class. I think some people, we definitely held the show jumping over Chipmunk going into Tokyo, and I think you still have to hold the show jumping over both of these horses. They are absolutely vulnerable to a pole, but Chipmunk out jumped Ballamore Class. He had 1 rail over the 2 rounds in Tokyo. Ballamore Class had 1 rail in each. So I would leave it as nothing to note between the two of them. You know, I don't think there's any difference between them in the show jumping. It would be my opinion. And so I have Michael comfortably, I have him ahead of Ballamore Class. I'd be quite confident that he's going to be ahead of Ballamore Class in the first phase. And then it's a question of, is there a real difference between them on the cross country? And I don't think there is. I think it's an interesting one. You know, Fisher Chipmunk, he's won Brabham on a 19. He's looked incredibly comfortable around some really decent tracks with Michael, and I think he has speed. I think he has stamina. I think he has the accuracy. I know other people haven't seen his pin in Tokyo, but it was actually a late falling pin. I'm happy to forgive that for sure, and so therefore I feel Prediction Center has this right.
Can I give you a fun fact?
Go on.
Well, we're in the swing of it. Fisher Chipmunk FRH has the best finishing score at 4-star long level since 2008 for his Brabham victory, 19.4, with Julia Krajewski in 2018, which puts into context just how good that performance was a few years ago. And that was kind of on the way up, so to speak.
I think it puts into context how much we've converted Nicole Brown into being a stats geek. It's class.
I dream these things these days. I was so excited when I found that.
What's interesting there, I mean, like, part of the fun of this is that, okay, we'll never see these kind of, our top 35 horses ever coming together. That there will be things which, well, look, the first question is, do we think Michael Young goes to Badminton? Like, will we ever see Chipmunk go around there? And will we see that? Possibly not 2021 in terms of, I guess, where we're thinking now. What I'm starting to think about when I look at that list at the top end of it is Bertoni. Like, what happens between now and then? How do those favorites look going into Bertoni? I think Michael, Michael being ahead of Oliver and Piggy will be interesting going into Bertoni if that's still the case. Want me to scroll down a bit?
We need to, again, so for those of you not looking at this, number 3 on the list, it gets incredibly close here. But Cooley Masterclass is third on 9%. I think that's definitely going to be a discussion point. Piggy French and Brookfield Innocent fourth on 8%, and Laura Collett London 52 are fifth on 7%. I'm going to go through the top 10 and then we can discuss them a little bit more. Ingrid Klimke, SAP Hale, Bob OLD 6%, Julia Karowski, Amon de Benaville 6%, Tom McEwen, Toledo de Cursor, this is going to be a talking point, 5%, Michael Young Fisher, Wild Wave 4%, and again another massive talking point, Nicola Wilson, JL Dublin, we're only just finding the European champion now, they're on 3%. That's their win chance. Obviously their top 3 chances are much higher and top 10 chances, but that's the order of the top 10. And there's definitely some discussion to be had around there, I think.
World Wave ahead of JL Dublin.
Now, I think
ahead of Toledo de Cursor.
So I'm gonna. So how does Prediction Center is it's very powerful technology because it's taking in loads and loads of data points, and it's one of our only tools that factors in rider as well as the horse stuff. So the ELO is just the horse. The HPR is just based on horses, actually are expected values, expected dressage score, expected show jumping probabilities, clear cross-country probabilities, and all that. They all get thrown into Prediction Center as well, but they're all just based on the horse. But for Prediction Center, we take in venue and we take in the athlete as well. So the venue characteristics tend to pop up and the athlete's form pops up. And I can't help but thinking, and this is interesting, since we first built Prediction Center over 4 years ago, Oliver Townend, we used to see his horses almost a little bit undertreated because he used to take a lot of horses to 5-star that didn't always have the best chances. And it didn't know, his clear rate at 5-star wasn't as consistent. He's really changed tack in the last few years. He's become much more consistent, a little bit more picky with which horses he's bringing there. So Oliver, I think, is probably now starting to give the likes of Cooley Masterclass a little bit of a bump. But we're also talking about, in Cooley Masterclass, a double Kentucky winner, and this horse was one uncharacteristic pole away from setting the lowest ever 5-star score at Maryland last year. He dealt with the hills at Maryland. I know plenty of horses made the time that day, but write him off and discount him a little bit at your peril, I think. And this is where having an objective metric, because I probably wouldn't have had Masterclass in my top 10 possibly. I think it's easy to write horses off, and this is where that objective metric gives you an order. And yes, I might end up doing some switches here, but it's just making me remember, hang on, Cooley Masterclass, he is a hell of a horse.
He is. That's that's where we come back to the objectivity of he's never been to badminton, whereas the likes of Toledo de Cursa have with Tom McEwen. Laura Collett's London 52 is yet to tackle badminton. So I can't wait to see. Hopefully we will see a few of those this year take that on. I was surprised. I'll admit I was surprised Cooley Masterclass featured so highly ahead of a few of those other horses. But then he's been on the podium, I guess, at Maryland at the 5-star at the back end of this year.
And he won Kentucky.
And he's won Kentucky twice. Yeah.
Twice. I mean,
that's more than a lot of those other horses on the list.
Double 5-star winner. You know, I mean, it's more than everybody on the list, I think.
Ballamore class, I guess.
Boom. Diarm Burn. What a drop. You are correct. Some haven't even done a 5-star.
Yeah, but I mean, I suppose, look, the technology can tell you so much, and I agree with you. I mean, it's the analytical show in terms of what we use the Overlander show for and what we use your brain for. But it can only tell you, like, it has to read what it's telling you. Double, you know, Cooley Masterclass has won Kentucky twice. It's going to have to, you know, build that in.
Well, he's
equally,
also
though, at this. Sorry, just to finish this. Equally, we have to build it in. He's won Kentucky twice, you know, and that's the bit that I really like. What data does for us. You've mentioned it a couple of times, Sam, in terms of a challenge in our own bias. Cooley Masterclass probably just hasn't. I mean, those two Kentuckys were probably at a time when, what would we say, like, it was a really big, busy time in the sport. Like, that Kentucky always comes straight up, like, it rolls straight into badminton. It never really stays as a long news cycle. Not that any of them do, because there's always the next event. But Oliver became world number one, I think, at the second. I think it was the second Cooley Masterclass victory. Was Oliver's first ever world number one, the beginning of that dominance where he remains today. I just think, I think it's a really, you said it, Sam, in terms of just reminding ourselves. In another sense, it kind of feels obvious. Like, if he goes up against some of those horses at badminton this year, Cooley Masterclass would finish ahead of plenty of them, in my opinion.
And it depends on the badminton as well, because again, you're thinking Ballamore or Cooley Masterclass, you're going to put him behind Toledo de Cursa on speed, and I fully agree with you. If you're jumping that conclusion, but speed might not be enough of a factor. It wasn't at Maryland, and enough of them made the time, and we've seen that at badminton loads of times. You know, we've seen double figures of people making the time at badminton. It's the first weekend of May. It could be really good ground, and then it's hard for Toledo, who didn't produce his best test at the Olympics. It was very good, but it wasn't perfect, and that's something he's done before down at Po in 2019. And I think that is all factored in, and I would probably have Cooley, if I was betting just on the dressage phase, I'd probably have Cooley Masterclass ahead of Toledo, and in this game, that's a huge advantage. And you forget that dressage is the most influential phase.
Interestingly, just on that, so it was 2020 that his dressage wasn't up to his usual standard. But all I was going to say is 2019, which coming into this, when he won, was the highest high performance rating. I think I'm right in saying is on the ECHA ratings database. I think it's a 109. Nobody has come close to that in recent times. Let's discuss next on the list. So the fourth favourite with 8% win chance would be Piggy March and Brookfield Innocent, ahead of Laura Collett London 52, who actually beat Brookfield Innocent at Po in 2020 that we were just talking about. How do we feel that Brookfield Innocent is marginally ahead of London 52? And how big is 1%, Sam, first of all, I guess, on the prediction centre? Is that very, very, very small?
Well, it's in this type of a field, if it was, we know this is never going to happen, that we're going to see all of these 35 horses in the same field. So that's why we're down to fractions. We're down to 8% versus 7%. Look, they're identical on the top three. They're both at 19%. So look, it's very small, and I think it's very correct. They've had this is possibly one of the best rivalries in the sport, is the Brookfield Innocent London 52.
What that does
you know,
for me,
they've
Sam,
had
is
some.
sorry to interrupt you. I think it's a big reminder of where Brookfield Innocent is. There was nothing between them really when Laura won Poe. In real terms, you know, I don't
think
know
it was
what the
point one.
yeah, okay, well,
Yeah, it was 0.1. Yeah,
nothing.
in Poe.
So
Yeah.
like, but what happens in our minds and what happens, you know, in the terms of first is first, second is nowhere idea, is that London 52 is now a 5-star winner. Then London 52 goes and gets you know, Olympic glory, while Piggy stays at home.
Well, actually, I mean, ironically, I think the Olympics has boosted London 52's reliability and speed ratings, and I think it's dropped down a little bit his dressage and his jumping, and that's probably been the difference here. I think without the Olympics, I think that's damaged London 52's ratings a little bit, only a small bit.
In performance terms and ratings, yes. Reputationally, no.
Oh, I think it has reputationally, D. I think it has.
I don't
like
think
he
think
felt
so.
bomb-proof. He felt the question marks for him were cross country, and he was a bomb-proof for it. In terms of dressage and show jumping, you know, I would have said I actually don't. When you add the two phases together, Chipmunk, watch out, because he's going to be, if he's not ahead of you, he's right on your heels, and he's going to out jump you. And the opposite has happened, and it's which has reminded us, by the way, with the likes of, because when we get to discussing JL Dublin, when you see a horse go and deliver something really special, same with Falco, it's not about, it's so easy to go one result. That horse is that result every time they go in the ring, and they're not. You know, we've got to remember that London 52, because even dressage and show jumping are more predictable than cross country.
Yeah.
And what happened in Tokyo is a real factor of this sport.
I would challenge the fact that, and this, I just think the gold medal parties, the MBE, the excitement that surrounds the Brits winning gold and being part of that. If you ask people on the street at the moment, London 52 or Brookfield Innocent, London 52 is a more famous horse right now. And one part of being a famous horse kind of equates to being a good horse. That's very different to performance ratings and to digging into, like, how many people, if you walk up to them at badminton, are, maybe I'm doing the general public at badminton a disservice. I don't mean to if I am, but I don't think that many people will drill into the difference between, we'll say that Brookfield Innocent is right up there alongside London 52. I think people will say London 52 is a 5-star winner and was part of the Olympic team. Where's Brookfield Innocent? Reality, he's 0.1 behind at Poe, and the Olympics were good, not great for Laura. They were pretty good, not
Brookfield
amazing.
Innocent won an individual silver medal on a very, very good score in Avranches.
100%. But a European silver versus the excitement of gold medal parties, Boris Johnson walking around patting you on the head. What I mean is it's the difference between like the fame and reputation that comes with the Olympics, or in our sport a 5-star win, as opposed to being 0.1 off it. And I think seeing Brookfield Innocent there's nothing between them on that prediction center, 7%, 8%. Like, to answer your question, Nicole, even in a very tight field like that, what this is really telling you is it's wide open. These are very, very evenly spread. There's not much between them. If anything, there's nothing between them. I think it's a great reminder of that. Sam, you were just about to say, before I cut in on top, that's a rivalry developing. I think that's one of the most interesting head-to-heads in the sport at the moment, Brookfield Innocent against London 52.
And I think JL Dublin will, could kind of join them, because I think they're just all very similar. But the point that people, I think they really could be right about JL Dublin, about Falco, if you're a Southern Hemisphere supporter or a Kiwi supporter. you could absolutely be right, and you could be saying, I told you so, and it was obvious. Look at them at Avant, or look at them at Poe. It was obvious that they were going to win WEG. How could you guys not have them as the best horse in the world going into 2022? You could prove us right. You could be right, but look at what happened to London 52 at Tokyo. He was really good, but little chinks emerged. Look at what happened to Chipmunk in Tokyo. Pins happen, and they've got to prove it time and again. They've got to do it over and over. So that's why they're not there.
I absolutely love this, and I think this is one of the best things about having this conversation, is to kind of find all of these little angles. Because yes, if you go to Badminton and ask the public who is favourite, hopefully they've been listening to us. Tell your friends, post a link on your social media pages, blah 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 blah. But this is one of the things that is so fun about our sport, is that there are so many little nuances and tiny little angles that we can take and argue for and against. And I'd actually say then that you look at Nicola Wilson. She won the European Championships so impressively with JL Dublin. 20.9 she finished on her dressage score there, added nothing to it, and she is only a 3% win chance in this predictive field. So you could argue, why isn't she further up? She's behind the Olympic champion, she's behind Toledo de Curse, the Olympic individual silver medalist with Tom McEwen. She's also behind Michael Young's Fisher Wildwave, who I think we should come back to.
Yeah, well, this is a really interesting angle. I think is initially, I know why Mickey is up there. I know which part of the prediction center that is helping here, and it's the Michael Young bit. That's helping Fisher Wildwave. But that, folks, is real. That is why we use predictive analytics. This is built off millions of data points, and the machine has been looking at this sport for hundreds and thousands of results, and I mean hundreds of millions of data points. And it says that if you have a rider that good with this type of horse, that's a real benefit. And it will be. You can't just go, oh, Fisher Wildwave doesn't look like a superstar. Yeah, it doesn't fill the eye like some of the others. Well, look at what Mickey did with Fisher. Look, and Rakana absolutely did. Yeah. Everyone called her a pony, and she won 3 Kentucky. She was second at the World Championships. Under the current scoring system, Fisher Rakana would be a world champion, and Opgon Luva wouldn't be. So since they adjusted the dressage coefficient, Rakana would be a world champion. So Fisher Wildwave, I think he's. I saw him and was like, Asher, that's just Mickey's influence. Drop him down. And then again, your mind has to kick in, going, that's because Mickey's influence is real, and this is one of 2 10-year-olds. It's actually only 3 places ahead of the other 10-year-old in the field, which is Lordship's Graffalo. But they're the 2 youngest horses in this crop of top 35 horses. So again, if there's improvement and there's big progress and there's a big jump coming in 2022, you've got to say that Wild Wave potentially in the first phase could be one of those horses with the master on his back.
Can I pick out something that I think is interesting for the eventing podcast nerds? So everybody wants an angle. If you're going to get this far into the overview show, you want, I think, to be able to walk away with a couple of little sound bites, so that you can repeat them and sound smart, as opposed to all those people who are kind of rocking up saying, just behind Nicola Wilson and JL Dublin on that 3% win chance is another horse on a 3% win chance, Ross Cantor and All-Star B. And again, we talked about Laura. We talked about Laura's fame and fortune with London 52. Ross Cantor had it with All-Star B post Tryon. All-Star B, All-Star B, All-Star B. Then we have Baby Cantor, which means All-Star B takes a break from the sport. Then we have COVID, which means we have less action around. It's actually been a few years probably since the All-Star B star, in my opinion, was flying high. Not a huge amount has changed, but one thing that has changed His Lordship Scrafolo has arrived on the scene. When I'm in 2018 or 2019, brain, Lordship Graffalo, the baby, then you've got Zenshira, the pet, and then you've got All-Star B, the actual horse, the horse that we're talking about from a kind of a going to badminton and challenging. Everybody else is along for the ride or is just kind of, part of the stable. Lordship Graffalo, the baby, is up there on pretty much the exact same chances right now as All-Star B. While the world is focused on one, I think Eventing Podcast listeners are getting ready to see Lordship Graffalo as the horse that we associate with Ros Cantor for the next few years, as opposed to All-Star B, which has been the last few years. And I don't think that's a project. I think All-Star B, I think Lordship Graffalo is going to be right there at the top of some big fields across 2022.
It's interesting. So Ros and All-Star B, as you're completely right in saying, had a quieter couple of years. They had that brilliant result at Bertram in the 4-star short back in 2020. They obviously, things didn't quite go to plan for them this summer, and they ended up, while being in contention and right in contention, I should say, at the European Championships. I think I'm right in saying
20.6.
She was in the individual gold medal position in theory going in. If she had have gone clear inside the time, she would have been ahead of Nicola Wilson, JL Dublin.
Yeah, Ingrid.
It didn't, and Ingrid obviously as well had some time faults out on course. So it's one of those that actually that has done All-Star B a little bit of harm in this field and brought his percentage win chance down, whereas Lordship Graffalo is very much the young gun coming on the scene, went very, very well at Blenheim. I know Ross thinks a huge amount of him going into next year. They have two massively different form points in so much as All-Star B is a world champion. Lordship Graffalo is yet to face anything like a field, like this hypothetical field. But I think I'm right in saying he had one of the highest rated ELOs of a 9-year-old last year, Sam? Something like that. He was one that really caught your eye on a number of occasions.
Yeah, he's right up there in terms of a one to watch one. He's massively exciting. I think it's what do we do with All-Star B? I think we all had. I think it was probably the first time, Dee, that you possibly might have had egg on your face was Nereo's badminton win, when Nereo had 3 down at Burley the previous autumn, and looked tired and looked like this was a horse with a massive career who had been on the individual podium back in 2010, and was 4th at 2012 in London, and it was the early part of the 10s that was the Nereo time, and we were now in the second half of the 2000, around 2017, I think was his win. It's a long time on from them. We had written him off, and even when he was there in a position where he could win it, or I think he was 3rd going into the show jumping, we were still like, he's, if he stays in the top 10, if he can keep it to 2 down and stay in the top 10, that.
He hadn't jumped clear at a 5-star in probably, I think it was about 5 years.
So that's a little bit how jumping works, because even the good ones can have a pole. Toledo de Cursor had one at WEG. London didn't go well at Tokyo. Fisher Chipmunk jumped clear in that second round at Tokyo, which is one of the toughest rounds of show jumping I've ever seen in the sport. And it caught a lot of people out. So
Chipmunk is a better jumper, though. You have an awful bias against Chipmunk's jumping, but
he had 3 down somewhere with Mickey in a 4-star short or something.
He had 5 down in RVL, but
5 down. No, it was Jardy. I remember.
But you're talking 2 years ago. Like you're talking to, I think he had 8. He'd had 8 clears on the bench.
Good horses don't have that many poles down.
I think we've also had the conversation around how our bias with Fisher Chipmunk show jumping actually was a little bit swayed by rounds such as that, and it is better on paper than it is in our minds, and that is something that I think this show challenges us with, of saying, we're talking about Ros Cantor Lordship Graffalo, who has been a very, very good horse this year, has been 2nd twice at 4-star long format, and yet he's ahead of Piggy March's Veneer Chimera, who is a badminton winner, who is a real 5-star stalwart, was on the podium at Bicton earlier on this year, and would be perhaps one, Sam, who has had a couple of poles on the last day at some of those big 5 stars, and maybe that is what is knocking her chance in such a good field. But that's where it becomes so interesting, because we've still got, if we scroll down a little bit further, we've still got the likes of
well, I want to ask your opinion on All-Star B quickly, and this a little bit applies to Hale Bob, who's up there on 6%, by the way. You know, really influential. I think number 5 on the list. These older horses who have, I think they're where Nareo was before he won Badminton, which means that if either Hale Bob or All-Star B come out and win Badminton, I think we shouldn't be entirely surprised, because that we've seen this in the sport. And with the All-Star B thing, he hit his first 8 minutes of the Europeans on a 20.6. Like, I think this horse could have won if he had started at the Olympics. I think he could have won it, knowing what we know about the Olympics now, and knowing what we know about All-Star B now. I still think he could have won the Olympics. He's that good, and he was incredible for 8 minutes on the cross country course. And then it was possibly too fast. You know, like she did go. She was really on it. Like, she was 4-star short speed. Like, she was Akin speed, and maybe. You know, he didn't look visibly too tired, but maybe it was just that intensity, and mentally he'd gotten a little bit fatigued by the end of the course and made those couple of mistakes. But that possibly sharpens them up. I don't think it means he's gone at the game. You know, comes out, jumps a clear easily on the last day, had done a 20.6. Like, we're only what I would call an incident away from talking about him still as the best horse in the world in our heads, because he's European champion or Olympic champion.
For me, I think a horse like him coming into this year would be particularly dangerous from a team perspective, because they've got so much experience. They will go to Badminton really knowing that actually they have to perform. I still believe that if Roz had gone to a 5-star before Tokyo, she may well have been one of the 3, because she would have backed up form at 5-star level that the others had that she didn't have when she was the reigning world champion. Take that as you will, but you would take her to Badminton, and because they have to kind of prove themselves, they could so easily go out and win Badminton this spring. Lordship Scruffalo, on the other hand, I would say is a championship horse, one looking forward to Paris 2024, and, you know, is going to really come into the peak of his powers in the next couple of years, and will probably grow up this list along with a few of the others. Sarah Bullimore, Karue one, Shane Price and Virgil, another very much in the same sort of camp as All-Star B. If they could still go out and win these 5 stars, they're on this list because they are among the best horses in the world. And for me, I think we probably will see one of them go and win Badminton this spring. I think we will see it.
Yeah, one of who?
One of these 35. I agree with you on that.
I think I'm getting off the fence. No, I think we'll probably see one of the top few go and win Badminton this spring.
All-Star B's in the mix is I think the thing. I think that.
Yeah, and also really likes Badminton.
Yeah, and do you know what? But he'll go, and you know, she kind of needs to prove herself to go to a World Championships to defend her title in September. You know, the British team is very, very strong. If she wins Badminton, she puts herself right back in that list. If she's top 10 at Badminton, she's still got a bit of work to do, depending on how everybody else goes. But it's a tough old squad to break into, which means they need to go and get the good results.
There's 2 other questions that I want to address. One is, we've got to talk about the Aussies. You mentioned Virgil, and we haven't got to Vasily de Lassos yet. And I think as much as they are still on their victory parade for being Eckerating's Horse of the Year and a horse we love, it shocked me where his position was on this, and it really challenges me to think about Vasily more objectively, and not just about the horse I love because he finished on his dressage score and he's done what Andrew Hoy has, you know, he's done what he's done for Andrew Hoy's career and made an incredible story from that point of view. He was 4th at the World Games. He was 3rd in Olympic Games. He's produced big ratings at the other events that he goes to, but he does, you know, he takes on the Germans, and he just usually finds a couple too good for them. Like, we know that. Like, Vasily's being a solid horse, but possibly not a gold medal horse, is not a new thing. It's not a new angle. And I guess he's a victim of being in with the 35 best horses in the world, because he never will be, and none of these horses ever will be. And he's the sufferer, because so many of these are going to be ahead of him on the dressage, and they're going to click. You know, some of them are going to have fences, some of them are going to have time faults, but they're not all going to have fences and time faults. And I think that's what kills him in a field like this. And probably Virgil's the same. And a lot of these sort of solid horses, Vinci de Levine's down here, Z Classic Moe, these more, Xavier Fair is probably another one who's a little bit higher up than I thought, but that's because he's probably got the better dressage of all of these. It just shows the impact of dressage, and I think that if you're looking at this and you're seeing the Vasily actually even only down at a 4% top 3 chance, that feels like rubbish, because he's been 4th at World Championships and 3rd in the Olympics, and you think he's got to be much higher. In reality, wherever the championship is, he's not going to have these 35, so he will have a higher chance. But it also makes you think a little bit, going like, you'd still have to be wary. If it was a gambling sport, you'd still have to be careful about going in and having a massive bet on Vasily to win an individual medal again, because it just might not go his way. Like he's not there in that first phase yet. He's not where he needs to be yet.
It's interesting though, because we talked a lot over the last few years around that sort of magic 5-star winning number of, I think it was 28. And I feel, and I'd be very interested to see how the numbers back this up, that has come down. We've obviously not seen the Badmintons and the Burleys, which perhaps would have swayed that a little bit over the last few years. For me, Vasily de Lassos, Andrew Hoy, maybe you could say Andrew Hoy, amazing rider, has been at the top level for so long and has been so successful, has won multiple 5-stars. But actually, if you were talking earlier on about the Michael Young effect of recent form at 5-star in the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years, Andrew Hoy's form at 5-star in that period hasn't been nearly as dominant, and therefore maybe it's punishing him there as well.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, as you say, the machine takes everything into account. Andrew and the Vasily team will say, 5-star hasn't been the focus, and Vasily is a long way from Andrew's other horses right now in terms of proven track records. But I think Sam's identifying an important thing in the sport. It's worth repeating, in that dressage is the most influential phase in the sport, and when you show up, it is possible that you will be behind a Hale Bob and and an All-Star B, and a Fisher Chipmunk and an Amon de Bonneville, but that one of them, and you'll have another group, like you can imagine, maybe Tom McEwen at the Olympics, who will kind of drop back into the 26, 27 area, even though they have the potential to be in around that 23, 22. You'll have maybe Oliver at Kentucky. We saw another example of it. There's going to be another group who arrive back into the mid-20s who had the potential to be at the top. But if you're a horse that can just about get a 28, 29, 30, you need a few things to go wrong. So Sam mentioned it, like, they're not all going to have problems. If there's 10 horses ahead of you, you need the All-Star B situation to happen at the Europeans, or you need the odd freak thing to happen to one of those top horses. Maybe it's not a freak thing. Maybe it's more like, you mentioned Scandalous. We know that Scandalous can lead, but we also know, you mentioned Falco. We know that Falco can lead, can do a great test, but can also come on cross country. And then we have horses that can't show jump, or that, Sam, as you said, it's a very binary piece where they don't show jump. They can show jump clear all the time, and then, like Toledo, they have a pole, or they don't show jump clear all that often, and then every so often a Classic Moe or a Nereo will go into the final at Badminton and jump clear when they hadn't in a long time. Dressage, like, how would you see, if, like, I think just bring it back to that, you talked about All-Star B winning Badminton. How would you see it playing out? What type of badminton does it need to be for All-Star B to win it? It's not that inconceivable, because All-Star B can do a 20-odd dressage test. Once they get that, there's not that many horses. There's only maybe 1 or 2 who are going to be ahead of them, And if you're picking one of Oliver's, or you're picking Chipmunk, or you're picking Hillbug, you can see how they can all fall behind All-Star B and they come on to win it. How do you see Vasily winning this? You can't, really. Let's be honest. What we're talking about is like a 28, 29. There is no way.
2014. Badminton 2014 is what you need. The Pauline Brocca, yeah.
Exactly. And now you're identifying it. You need even, you need the Eric Winter speed test, which would suit Vasily. But equally, you need it to be close enough that actually it really knocks out. It adds 5 penalties to them all.
And what's interesting is Chile Knight is right there for Gemma Tattersall on the same numbers as Vasily and Andrew Hoy, and I think they're two such similar horses, and they'll never have odds. They'll never be this far down in a prediction center of a top one because of the same point we've made. They're not all going to be there, but you've got to think about how it goes. To put a tiny bit of objectivity and substance around what we're saying about the dominance of the dressage filets being the most influential. Very, very quick objective figure on that is that winners, even at 5-star, where cross country is more influential than it is at any other level of the sport, we still find winners coming from the 93rd percentile in dressage, which means that they're in the top 3, top 4, and the 90th percentile in cross country, which means that you're better than the 9 out of 10 horses. So that's where cross country's at its higher. It's still down around mid 70s, I think, in the show jumping, which kind of surprises people. But look, the clear rate is 25% in 5-star. So if you're jumping a clear round, you're still doing what 1 in 4 horses are doing. You're not an outlier in show jumping yet. So none
of that's hating on a Vasily. We know how much he's liked at HQ. And equally, this will be a very different conversation when we're previewing Bertoni and we're talking about the influence of those hills, the influence of speed, the importance of jumping. But the conversation we will be having is, can you get past the 6 horses, the 8 horses, the 9 horses in front? The question will be, how do you see this playing out in terms of how far ahead can Chipmunk, can Ros Cantor, can Asha P, can Via Montemats, who's been there and done well. Sam, you mentioned Sandra at the start of the show. How far ahead can they get? I think it's really interesting. I mean, it's not novel looking at the 3 phases, but it is interesting to kind of have the opportunity to really drill in and talk about the horses like this over 3 phases coming up against each other. I love that Karua is on the list. I think that's a really interesting one over the next couple of years. I love Lordship Graffalo on the list. I think it's really interesting. Like, this for me feels like a fun way to identify them, find them, not forget them. Chile Knight and Gemma will be top of people's minds, rightly so. 5-star winner. I love that Banzai de Loire, for example. Yaz Ingham joins the party because Blenheim is not Bicton and Blenheim is not a 5-star. But equally, it was a tough competition. There was a lot of people that Yaz beat that day. Another young gun in Molly Summer and Charlie van der Heijden, the same. I love creating the list 35, and then we get to hear, and then you can have all the opinions you want back and forth. But this is the fun part.
If we were to be really bold and say, come on, let's put a name on it, who would win our hypothetical competition from this hypothetical list of horses? Who would win it? Who would your gut instinct say, when we look at the top of this prediction center, who would your gut instinct say actually they'd win it?
You have to be careful with this type of thinking. I'm going to put a name. I'm going to give you who I think is the best horse in the world right now, which is really why we're asking that question. Who do you think is the best horse in the world right now? It's Michael Young and Fisher Chipmunk FRH. In my opinion, he's top on ELO. He has the highest HPR at 4-star short from his Lamulin run in 2021. From what I saw at the Olympic Games, I don't think he's disgraced himself in any way. He didn't win that, and those clips are in the sport right now. That's real. That's fine. He didn't win the Olympics, and that's fine. But he's now also top on another.
You said that was fine.
Using another.
You said you definitely said. You said that was fine. A bit too much for us to believe you.
It's fine. Honestly, it's okay. I'm over it.
It's fine.
But he is.
D?
But the beauty
Sorry.
of the sport is that he still loses more often than he wins, and that's why I love this game, and that's why all the hopes and dreams are alive when we drive back onto the hallowed turf of Kentucky's and Badminton's and Atkins and Pratoni, beautiful Pratoni as well. It's gonna be fantastic, but it's Chipmunk.
D?
Yeah. Chipmunk is the right answer. It's the boring answer, but Chipmunk would win. I mean, you can tell me another horse would win, and we could have that debate. But it's so hypothetical, Nicole. Like, there was a time I loved these, but it's so hypothetical that like it's quite difficult. But yeah, the best horse in that list is Chipmunk, and who would win on a wet Badminton against who would win on a fast Akin? We can have the debate. Who would win if you'd included a horse like that you should have included? He just fell short of one of the criteria. But who would have won Badminton, 2020? The answer is Greb. Who's the kindest in the sport? That's Ingrid.
You are getting so subjective right now.
Who's the most talented?
This is
Ingrid.
your opinion. It does not reflect their
who's
opinion.
The most exciting horse? Asha P. There's loads of ways of looking at it, Sam. There's loads of ways of looking at it, Nicole. But yeah, who's the best horse? It's Chipmunk FRH, now known as Fisher Chipmunk, produced by Julia, ridden by Michael.
I mean, I would have said to Lisa to curse the Tom McEwen.
You're British.
You're allowed.
Okay.
You're allowed.
Anyway, I find it fascinating. I'm sure there will be people listening to this, watching this, shouting at us, disagreeing, agreeing. But I love this kind of discussion.
Disagreeing and arguing about this is what it's about. That's what emotion and entertainment of the sport is about. The only thing I would say is if you've got a list of the top 10 horses in 2021 or 2020, or the top 10 horses in the sport right now, you have to have a way to measure them. That's what starts the list. So do you want to do it by 5-star wins? That's fine. Do you want to do it by wins? That's fine. Do you want to do it by clear rates? Find the way to create your list. Find a better list, and then we can discuss it. That's the fun of it. Finding the way to create the list and then making it. For me, having performances, which is your HPR, added to your ELO, which is your rating over time, and then adding to a flagship event like the top 10 in the Olympic Games. You add that stuff together, you get 35 horses. Making them go over Badminton was just something to kind of have as a way of sparking the conversation. Equally, if we'd made them go over Aachen, that table would have looked slightly different. Not majorly different, but slightly different. And the reason not majorly different is actually there's not as big a difference as you would think, though it's very embedded into us, the 4-star short horses versus the 5-star. But really, you're looking at a very similar formula, which is you've got to be able to do very good dressage tests. That's the same in both.
Interestingly, just on that point, final thing for me is if you were looking at it 4-star short rather than 5-star long, the big rivalry that we said between Laura Collett, London 52, Piggy French, Brookfield, or Piggy March, Brookfield, Innocent was actually reversed. Laura was 3% ahead of Piggy if it was over a short format track, which is probably where we see that Europeans and Olympics form coming into play. And the other big mover would have been Marilyn Little and RF Scandalous, who are obviously so strong in the first phase and have really delivered at the 4-star short level, haven't delivered at the 5-star long level. They were the key differences, but a lot
your 5-star as well that you ran it over is Badminton, and Piggy is the reigning Badminton champion. So there is going to be an influence there, comparing to Laura Collett MBE's Badminton form versus Piggy March's Badminton form. So,
guys, thank you for the debate, and thank you, listeners, viewers, for watching. I think my little takeaway from this is there's two things. You can start with emotion, you can finish with emotion, but it's very interesting when you go into the middle and you actually make a case for a lot of these other horses in the sport. Be a little bit more open-minded. We'll have our favorites, you know, that the Aussies and the US, I think, might feel a little bit hard done by that they don't have someone featuring in the, you know, higher up there. But when you make a case for all of these horses, the young ones, the older ones that could come back and do an arreo, I think it's incredibly exciting. And I think it's what makes the current health of the sport absolutely massive. And I think where there's been a little bit of a famine in many ways for a couple of seasons, we could have the most almighty feast of eventing and top level performance in 2022.
What a line, Sam.
Yeah, an almighty one. I mean, it really will be.
An almighty one. We're looking forward to it. And actually, that just a very quick plug. We had a very, very good debate on the future of eventing. 2022, a pivotal year for the sport. It was out at the beginning of January. It has been so well received. Loads of discussion, loads of input. And if you love this show, then definitely that is one you should go back and give a listen to. We'll pop in the show notes because a lot of the similar sort of topics coming up, and looking forward to this year.
Diarm Byrne, any last words?
No, pleasure as always. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Diarm. Thank you, Overlander, and thank you, listeners and viewers. And tune in again next month for another Overlander overview show. Goodbye.